Hey friends, welcome back to Suns Today. You're home for the Summer Suns content. If you're watching us on the YouTube, thanks for doing that. Please do me a favor. We're trying to get to a certain number of subscribers. So if you have not subscribed, go ahead and hit that button and make sure you subscribe. You'll never miss a thing. It's been a big week around here at the Suns. We have more stuff coming up. So your subscription would mean the world to us. My name is Adam Eaton. And as always, the one and the only Mr. Trace Choco has joined me again this week. Trace, my friend, how are you?
I am good, and I have subscribed to the Suns YouTube channel.
I need to check that, yeah. I need to do an integrity check.
I count.
People. Yeah, okay. I need to do an integrity check for all the people who say they subscribed. But if you subscribe, that means you're going to get this entire show, which is a good one, Trace. We've got what's in the box. We got the mailbag. We'll tell you what grinds our gears. But as always, Trace, we start with one thing and one thing only. One big thing. And that is our big story of the week, brought to you by our friends at Werner, Hoffman, Gregg, and Garcia. They have 120 years combined legal experience, Trace. That's a lot, by the way. They also have unmatched customer service at the best in the business. Check them out at wernerhoffman.com. All right, here's what we know now, Trace. We think the House settlement is done, right? We think the ink is dry, although we have until July, so who knows what's going to happen. But we think the ink is dry. What we do know at this point is schools can spend up to $20.5 million in rev share. They can spread that across all the various sports within their plethora. So the big story this week, Trace, if you were sitting in the big chair, and I don't know what chair you're sitting in now, I'm sure it's a very comfortable
It's big enough.
We're in the big chair. How would you distribute the $20.5 million for UCF sports?
Can I say first, though, caveat that I'm not privy to the financial data that shows the revenue and the expenses for each program at UCF, okay? And I think that would shape my decision to some degree. All right. And I think you're going to see different schools that excel in a sport. Oklahoma, it's already been reported, may be spending money on its wrestling program. You know, if you're stronger in some sports than others, maybe you double down and give those sports additional funds. That all having been said, crunch the numbers. I was not a good math guy, still not.
I wish I had a sounder for you crunching numbers.
I have seen several reports, SEC schools amongst them, putting 75% towards football, and I would go with that. I would concur with that. And I know it's a discussion that you and Eric Lopez and I have had on Around the Kingdom Overtime. Could you spend enough money to make men's basketball competitive in the Big 12? How much money would it take to accomplish that? I'm going to go with what I've seen, 15% towards men's basketball, because I believe they weren't very far off, right? 7 wins, 9 or 10. Get you in an NCAA tournament. So to me, that's not very far off. Some additional resources could get you there. Now, what I have seen a lot of is 5% towards women's basketball. Breaking news, Adam. No, I'm not getting 5% in my model. I'm going to split that 5%, 2.5% to baseball, 2.5% to softball. Leaves you 5% with the simple math on the napkin. And everybody else can figure it out based on their revenues and their expenses. So I leave that to Terry Mahadjer and staff to decide after I have decreed 5% for rowing and tennis and golf and women's basketball. But there is no amount of money that UCF could ever spend on women's basketball that would make it competitive and turn the meter and the UCF community for women's basketball. I know it's the hot sport growing across the country, WNBA as well, but I don't think the interest is here. I would put money into baseball and softball and let the other sports work off the 5%. And back on football, it's got to do well or all of this stuff isn't going to matter. So you got to make football do well.
Yeah, I like your percentages as well. I took a slightly different route, and I'll give my caveat here, and that's what Scott Frost has done, at least so far in recruiting, is he doesn't seem to be as enamored with the stars as he is with fit and scheme. We'll see if that pans out. If that strategy works, then my numbers would absolutely be a good idea. If that does not work, then I need to get my pencil back out and reassess some stuff. But here's where I'm at. 70% football. I'm going to go down a little bit from your 70% football, and I'm going to hope that Frost and the staff can get really good at finding diamonds in the rough and maybe not paying the top dollar for some of the guys. Now, I'm concerned about the guys we have to keep, but I'm going to go 70% for football. I'm going to go 20 for men's basketball. And this may be a pick because I love men's basketball. Basketball is one of my favorite, if not my favorite sport. But I think in the Big 12, Trace, I know you can't compete, and I know that the other schools like the Kansases of the world are going to spend a lot of money. I'd love to see us more competitive in the most competitive league, get a bid into the NCAA tournament, have some noise, from the postseason. I just think we have an opportunity in Florida, talent-rich state, to up the ante on men's basketball. So I'm going to go 20% and see what that gets me on men's basketball. Now I have 10% left. 7% softball. You mentioned it earlier. There are
7%.
7%. There are some sports that.
Well, I think you're Eric Lopez's favorite.
There are just some sports that schools are known for. I think softball has been a sport that UCF has done a really nice job in, and you see how far they've gotten with perhaps a smaller amount. I think you give them 7%, and you see if you can't become one of those top 5, 10, 15, 20 schools in women's softball, not the men's softball, and making a run in the tournament. And that leaves 3% for baseball.
Not a lot, Adam.
Not a lot.
3%?
Not a lot. 3% for baseball. Again, I think that it's competitive. I think
3% for baseball or 3% for everything left?
3% for baseball.
So
everybody else,
rowing and tennis and women's basketball and volleyball get nothing.
Figured. I'm on the Trace Shelko plan. Everybody else figured out.
Wow.
So I'm going 70, 20, 7, 3 is my split. And again, I'm going to invest on basketball. Again, we're in a basketball conference. I'd love us to be competitive there. I think you have the ability to have some eyeballs on you. You can bring some additional revenue, perhaps, if your basketball team is good. You're in the best conference out there. You have an opportunity. You can get some guys, I think. And so I'm gonna go all in on men's hoops. Now, I don't know if Johnny Dawkins is my coach. We'll get to that later, but I'm going to go all in on men's hoops.
I think what this does speak to, and do the math on your own at home, drop it in the comments, drop it on the YouTube message board there in the comments, and let us know how you divvy up the percentages. What school out there, Adam, can be good at everything? Schools are going to be making decisions. You're already seeing some programs cut at some schools across the country. I think that's going to accelerate. And I think it's going to be interesting who gets zeroed out in some programs at some schools.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing a lot about academic scholarships kind of raising the level, and I don't know where that sits in terms of how you give up the rev share pie. But yeah, I think there's going to be some schools who are going to have to make some tough choices, and it's going to be really interesting to see what a school like Kansas does. They're a basketball school first and foremost, but their football program has been doing well. Their softball program isn't bad. Their baseball program is pretty good. Where do you divvy up money if you're Kansas? If you're UConn? What do you divvy up money? Men's and women's basketball carry UConn.
I'm very curious what the football percentage is at UConn that is a basketball first school.
What do you do with Duke? I mean, it's a basketball powerhouse. Again, they're in the ACC. They've had some success in football. North Carolina has had some success, men's and women's basketball, plus football. Plus, I think they're a pretty good lacrosse team, if I have that right, or a soccer program as well. So there's going to be some schools out there that are going to have to make some strategic decisions on how they divvy this money up. But let's also not be naive about all this, right? The rev share is one component. That's a component that the universities and schools can control. There's also the NAL side, which could buttress and factor in to maybe somebody getting a lower rev share amount, but a higher NAL amount, and still keeping those programs competitive. So we'll see which donors have the deeper pockets.
I'm curious what everybody else's math is. I hear from Night Nation, why aren't we good at fill in the blank sport? And that crowd often shuns the talk of resources. If you zero out programs, and nobody wants to take away from football. Actually, 70% is one of the lowest numbers that I've seen talked about allocated for football. So you're really going low on football. For everybody else, how low would you go on football to fund the other sports? I'd be curious. I think, Adam, you're going to see some people that are higher than 75.
I think so. I agree.
They're going to be like, maybe no amount of money can make men's basketball into Houston in the Big 12 and the legacy schools that are powerful, Kansas amongst them. Well, maybe UCF can never get there.
I would counter that with all the other schools are facing the same dilemma, right? So how much is Houston going to allocate to basketball versus football, right? How much is Oklahoma State going to allocate? Like, I think this is an opportunity if you want to go a little heavier than your compatriots here. Maybe you have a chance to break in, and you're not going to maybe be a Houston overnight, but you get an opportunity to now get at the table in one of the best conferences out there. So my 70 is going to be mocked. I'm prepared for the mocking of my 70 because I suspect there are people out there that are 98% football. Everybody else figured out. I suspect that'll be a route, but I
don't think that's the only thing in your percentages that people are going to mock. I support softball, but at the expense of everything else.
How much did you give to tennis?
I let tennis and the rest figure out 5%.
Okay. So tennis, volleyball, rowing, like they're all splitting a smaller amount, right?
5%.
Okay. So I'm not so sure our valuations are off. I don't know what that 5% will equal at some point, but let us know how you'd split it out. Again, we're not experts on this, and there's certainly different ways to do that. I wonder if we'll ever get the real numbers. I wonder how many schools will release the rev share splits. I don't know if that'll be a closely guarded secret. Is that something that has to be reported if you are a state school? I'm curious to see if we actually ever get those numbers, Trace.
Yeah, and it may vary school to school. It may vary league to league, state to state. That will be interesting. And you mentioned NIL. We'll see how NIL itself is policed. And if that gets slushy, you're already seeing reports of Texas Tech with a budget for athletes mid $50 million range, right? Where's all that money coming from? That's not $20.5 million of rev share.
It's certainly not, Trace. I mean, that's probably something that down the road for us will really,
that really grinds my gears.
Grind our gears. This is the time where we tell you what's on our mind, what we're annoyed about, what we're frustrated about, what has caught our fancy. Trace Strelko, your gears have been grinded by what this week?
That they can't decide on a playoff format in college football, that they're back to the drawing board for 2026. This has changed year in and year out. I think this controversy is what fuels the NCAA and college athletics. They want shows like ours, talk radio, sports radio, and podcasts all over the country to constantly be talking about this. It is exhausting, Adam. Can't you decide on a playoff format? The FBS level has been doing a 24-team field. You see how it plays well for March Madness. You see how the NCAA tournament works for baseball and softball. It's not all this controversy. They are well watched. They are well attended. Why this constant jiggering of this? And that's hard to say. If you say it too fast, you can say it wrong. Of this format, Adam, it's just exhausting. Decide on something. Let's see how it plays out over a number of years, but year in and year out, they cannot come to an agreement. The controversy is exhausting.
That really grinds my gears.
Yeah, it's a great one, Trace. I'm going to give it 3 O'Learys on the George O'Leary index meter. This is beyond not good enough because I do agree with you. I think this is kind of an NFL style model where the NFL wants to be a 12-month-a-year league, and the schedule release gets some eyeballs, and training camp and OTAs and taping ankles, and there's always something the NFL is looking at. I think college football allows this to kind of be a conversation that gets us through some of these months. The difference between what you're talking about and some of the other programs and schools rather is TV networks and money, right? And more of those dollars are available to you in football. More of this stuff's available to you in football. So I do think they just love the conversation. I think they love the bickering.
They love it.
Of the antics. And it keeps, college football in the news cycle, which is what they want. Yes. It's frustrating for guys like you and I and fans of programs like our beloved Knights. But I think this is exactly what it is, that college athletics and whoever's in charge. Charlie Baker, I guess. I don't even know who's Rich Clark's in charge.
Who's in charge?
I don't even really know who's in charge of that, Trace. That's a good one. You know what grinds my gears?
That really grinds my gears.
Can we stop with the commitment graphics for college athletes? Can we just stop? Because, and I appreciate that you're telling people you want to go to a school and that this is the place you want to go to, but committed is just, maybe is not the right word. I plan to attend. Right now, I'm leaning towards the word committed. I don't know that we have that fully baked in our vocabulary and what that means. And I feel like we throw that around in college athletics, and you're seeing guys who are committed till they're not committed, then they're decommitted, they're uncommitted, they're recommitted. Can we just stop with the word?
They should be committed.
Can we just stop with committed? Call it something else out there in the audience. Tell me what word we should use. I'm not a
intention.
I'm not a linguist.
They intend.
I intend. There you go. Find the new word.
I intend to go to UCF.
It just does not work for me in committed, because you're not really committed because something's going to change, and that's fine. I'm not railing against somebody's ability to make a decision and change their mind. We all do it. But let's just not say you're committed if you're not committed, Trace. That's what grinds my gears. How many O'Learys does this get for you?
Can I give it 5 O'Learys? But I will give it 4 O'Learys. This is the worst thing ever and stuff. I 100% agree with you. I am fully committed to your commitment to not liking their lack of commitment.
I don't know if I like how that all went down, but at least our gears have been properly grinded, and now folks know what's on our mind, which means only one thing. That's right, friends. It's mail time, and it's brought to you by our good friends at Florida Football Prep. If you need some support getting your youth football program off the ground, Florida Football Prep has everything you need. Check them out at floridafootballprep.com. Trace, question 1 this week from a good old friend of ours, Capt Veej 1. Love the Suns content. Usually consume everything. Usually? I mean, I don't know about, I feel like usually there.
I'm giving that 4 O'Leary's usually.
Lately, though, everything with college football hinges on NIL and funding. Some fan fatigue is setting in. Very little joy about UCF. Does this ever get to you? And how do you kind of deal with that? And do you think we'll ever get some stability?
I just had it grind my gears. I am frustrated about it. It does cause that fatigue. And I think the area that I'm most struggling with, though, is the lack of being able to connect to the players. I think about that opportunity that I have to be at media availabilities, media days, and talking to guys. And, you run into them on campus, getting to know Darius Johnson through the years and Luca Dorado for men's soccer and other players that you've seen for years, Paul Rubelt for football. And that connection for me, and I am struggling, and I don't have an answer for it. And I have set out this summer, Adam, to kind of get my brain around how I want to relate to UCF athletics in the fall. See, even with the pro teams that I follow, right? It's not a complete roster turnover. Magic with a big deal with Memphis, right? They got a new player. They traded some guys, but they didn't lose everybody like UCF men's basketball just did, right? Or Baylor, right? As traditionally been well in college basketball, turn over the entire roster. I'm struggling with it. Curious your answer. I completely agree, and thus why it grinds my gears that there is that lack of stability.
Yeah, I think for me, the thing that's most frustrating is, there are plenty of hardcore Knights fans, Trace, that you and I know, who year in, year out couldn't wait for the season to start. And we're who's in our 2 deep, who's the quarterback, this guy graduated, we got this guy in the wings. And now there were plenty of fans out there who have taken the mantra of just tell me who's on the roster in August. And that's such a telltale sign, because there were so many people who used to think about the roster. Who's our backup running back going to be? This guy's graduating, so this guy's going to step in. And you had multiple years to kind of understand and know your team. And now that's fallen apart. And it makes it really challenging to get excited about this team, because you don't really know what it is that you have to be excited about. How to get through it? That's a great question. I think, again, I talked about this last episode. We're rooting for laundry, right? You're a Knights fan, so be a Knights fan and root for Knights as they present themselves to you. But it is frustrating. Will there be stability? I think stability will only come. There's talk about the transfer portal window shrinking to only 1. Will that happen? When will that be? I don't know. There's talk about maybe you lessen the number of transfers you can have without sitting out. Maybe if some of that stuff comes back, it'll make it a little bit more palatable. But the toothpaste is out of the proverbial tube, and I don't know that it ever really goes back in. I think we as fans are going to have to acclimate to it more so than it's going to acclimate back to us.
Well, what's hard about that too is that we'd started to see opt-outs of bowl games, but then remember last UCF football season, things not going well. You got players opting out in season, not wanting to burn that red shirt year, Xavier Townsend and others, right? That's even harder, right? If things don't start well or continue well in the midst of a 5-game losing streak, who bails on the roster in season? So it's not even connecting with a guy over the course of a 12-game football season or a 30-game men's basketball season. They may opt out. Jalen Sellers not playing again after an early season injury. I don't know what all went on there, but you never saw him play again. You'll see him in a Providence uniform in the fall.
Where's Providence, by the way? All right, at Brian W. Peterson. Some rumors of late about Terry Mohajir potentially talking to other schools, thinking about other jobs. Again, a lot of rumors. There's a lot of smoke around these things, but nothing has been reported yet. But if you could ask Terry one question as to why he should be retained as UCF AD, what would it be?
I can't tell, but does Brian have a position on retaining Terry Mohajir? I don't think I'd ask it quite like that. And I'm not sure we're at a point in his contract status with UCF that it is appropriate to ask that, right? He's got some time left on his contract. I'm not sure I would phrase it quite like that. I asked him at Big 12 spring meetings what he'd been most proud of in the first 2 seasons in the Big 12, and he said he gave me an answer, and he said afterwards that he didn't like his answer and wants to talk again about it. Maybe we'll have that opportunity coming up to talk to him about that. So I don't know that I would go about it that way. I think, though, and we talked about, do you have confidence in Terry Mohajir was a topic a few shows back. I think there are things that you can point to, the construction underway on the football stadium and the Roth Tower, the tourist development tax money, the fundraising money that has doubled the budget under Terry Mohajir's 4 years at UCF. I think a case can be made. I think we are also, as fans and followers of the program, sometimes unrealistic. This was going to be a difficult transition from the American into the Big 12, and I'm not sure we all were on point about that.
Yeah, I think what I would ask him is, what has he learned in his tenure so far as UCF's athletic director? And I would probably ask him this one question. If I gave you one mulligan, one do-over, one thing you could snap your fingers and change, what would that do-over be? I think they'd be curious to see kind of maybe where his head's at from there. A good old, do you remember this guy, Trace? Andrew_Cherico? Remember him?
Kind of. It sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's a big wig with the Magic now, but he found the time to ask us a question, and he wants to know, how important is it for UCF to win the North Carolina game to establish a winning presence under head coach Scott Frost?
0% important.
Wow.
Not important. Winning the space game, not important. Winning season, 6 wins, bowl game, more important. I don't care how they get to the 6. They beat North Carolina, that's fine. But what other games are they going to win? Winning North Carolina alone is not going to get them to 6 wins. I'm all for it. Beat North Carolina. Have big noon Saturday here on Fox. But that one game, let us not forget, UCF rallied, great second half comeback, beat TCU in Texas to go 3-0. How'd that season turn out? Nah, not important.
Look, I think it's relatively important. I don't have a figure I'll put on this, but doing some rough math, assuming you can get past the first 2 games, and I don't make
7%. 7%.
Assuming you get past the first 2 games, you win North Carolina. Now you've got that 3rd win. Now all you need to do is get lucky and pick off a couple of different schools in the rest of the Big 12 conference. You have Houston in the space game. West Virginia is going to be down this year potentially, right? You have a couple opportunities to maybe pick off a win here and there to get to 6. So I don't know that it's important to establish a winning presence, but I think if you want to have a winning season, it's very helpful to sweep those non-conference games, of which North Carolina features as one. So not sure if it'll create a presence, because you could win all 3 of those games, be 3-0, and lose the entire Big 12 slate. We've seen you close enough to do that before. We've seen that.
I 100% know they cannot be 5-6, needing 1 win, and have to travel to Provo, Utah, and beat BYU. I don't care what time of the day it is. I don't care if it's a noon game. I don't care if it's a night game. That is a difficult game to win on the road for UCF. I do not want them to be 5-6 and need the win at BYU.
At UCF Guy 1203 on Blue Sky wants to know, what is our idea about the 5-11 versus the 4-4-2-2-1-3? He posits, isn't 2 slots better than 1?
Well, that's a question, right, that I asked of Brett Yormark at Big 12 spring meetings, and they're fixated on this 5-11, which, of course, now there's, the Big 10, the SEC. They're not all playing on an even field here. How many conference games are you going to have? You're going to have 8? You're going to have 9? How many cupcakes games do you get, SEC? I think the 2 is better than the possibility that you're going to get 2. I don't know that there's a guarantee that you get 2 in that 5-11 model. And, it was Brett Yormark himself who said, yeah, maybe it's not in our best interest. It's your job for it to be in the Big 12's best interest. I didn't like his answer or the position of the Big 12 on that.
Yeah, look, I'm all in on let's do what's best for the good of the game, and I agree that should probably be the lens. But to your point, his paychecks say Big 12 on him, right? Not NCAA. So I would love him to think through that lens. And I do think if you told me every year we get 2 teams in, that feels like an attractive idea for me. Now, what I don't love is SEC Big 10 getting a larger monopoly. And so maybe there's some tinkering that needs to happen there to make that happen. But if you told me every year I'm guaranteed 2 teams, that basically means that the 2 teams that get to the championship game in the Big 12 have the inside track of getting in the college football playoff, right? And it'd be hard for me as a UCF fan to turn that down, knowing, are we ever going to be in that spot to be in that game? And we have that guarantee in front of us. Be hard to turn that down. At Lonely B UCF wants to know, what's the equivalent of JJ Spawn's putt? Do I need to explain this to you, Trace? Do you have the reference here?
I did 0 research on this question.
Great. JJ Spawn, he won the U.S. Open golf tournament this past weekend. 34-year-old player, not somebody who's in the top 30 of rankings, kind of a wild card coming out of nowhere to win the tournament. He was flirting with even par. He had some guys coming from behind him that potentially could tie him. On the 18th hole, he sunk a winding putt to essentially close the door and get the victory. An unheralded player, somebody who very few people thought were going to win this tournament, let alone win it in this fashion. So that's the context, Trace. Having said that, underdog, late game heroics. Who's the JJ Spawn of UCF?
I don't know. I don't have a good answer. What's yours? I don't know.
Maybe it's because of the verbiage here, but I actually think it's JJ Wharton's catch. I think that's a good equivalent to a game where UCF is down. They're fighting back. They backs against the wall. The other team is hot, and you make just a ridiculous play to seal a win. Even though that didn't really seal a win for those of us who know. But maybe it's because I saw the JJ and Spawn that I went with JJ Wharton's catch.
Gotcha. I'm going to go with yours.
At Limu Mark 407. Whatever happened to Commissioner Yomark's plans on rebranding the Big 12?
I'm going to give the guy this. Accomplished career, big ideas guy. And I think he's been a good leader for the Big 12, but he's taken some big swings on some things and had some misses. I know he's talking about having some international games, but men's basketball being played in Mexico, that has not exactly happened. Did Gonzaga join the Big 12? I don't think that's happened yet. Is it the All-State Conference? I think he was going to sell the naming rights to the conference. So big ideas. And of course, the whole concept of a Big 12 with 16 teams is ridiculous anyway, and a Big 10 with 18. I don't know why they hang on to those brand names. Just change it, but maybe that'll come up during Big 12 media days when the commissioner takes questions from the assembled media.
Yeah, I think he's tried to do some things outside the box here and there. You all remember, of course, I don't know how you'd forget. Last year, Nelly performed at the Big 12 championship game halftime show.
Well, the whole WWE thing they got going on.
I think he's trying some stuff in pockets. It's perhaps not as easy as he thought it might be. Again, he's coming from a world where he was with Rock Nation and Jay-Z, and he was with the Brooklyn Nets owned by Jay-Z, where it's probably easier to get some of these things worked out versus you're in the big what? The who? Kansas who? It's probably easier to get it worked out when you're with Jay-Z. Question of the week, Trace, comes from blackgold_ed. I don't understand this question, which is why it's question of the week. It is simply posted to me as fill in the blank. Carolina blue, Tennessee orange, Central Florida blank. Fill in the blank. Question of the week.
Well, the question seems to suggest one. If I'm forced to choose between black and gold, I'm going to choose gold because that's unique and not as prevalent as black. But the answer is black and gold. It is not Canaveral blue. Or any other, it's not pewter anymore. So black and gold is the answer, blackgold_ed. But if forced to choose only one, gold.
Yeah, am I supposed to pick between the blue and the orange? I don't know.
I think those Carolina blue, right? That's a term. That's Tennessee orange. That's
naming the color. Then it would be gold. I don't know that we own. I'd love pewter, by the way, but I don't know we have the.
I'm not anti-pewter. I'm fine with pewter.
So I'll go with gold as well. At Golden Knight _2, with the change in NIL in-house, would you, Trace Joker, be willing to cut multiple men's spectator sports? He lists basketball, baseball, and soccer.
No.
In order for football to be successful, he defines that as consistent 10-win seasons and a CFP invite every other year.
Every other year. Golden Knight _2. I want to hear from you on how you divvy up the percentages in the rev share. So
don't get caught. No. You get caught in the details. Are you cutting basketball?
No. First of all, you can't. You got to have 16 sports, so you can't. And no, absolutely not.
Every other. I need more.
That's what I'm trying. In order to be successful. No,
gotcha.
He's saying in order to be successful, and he's defining success, not. We cut those sports and we get that. That's what his definition of success is. Are you reading that question that we get those things? Well, then maybe. I like men's soccer just fine. But if you're telling me 10-win seasons and a sea of,
I need an update on that. Golden Knight _2. I also need to know, do we ever win the CFP? Because if we do, that'll change my answer exponentially.
Yeah, let's clarify that in the next show.
All right, bring it back, Golden Knight. At UCF _Zach. All right, this is a tough one. Happy National Mascot Day, by the way, Trace. That was
to
on
you
Tuesday,
and yours.
17th. UCF has shown no interest in reimagining glycerin.
I don't rule it out, Adam. I don't rule it out.
Would you support UCF having nitro and citronate be in a relationship? Or are mascots by their very nature not deserving of companionship?
First of all, I got to bring back a reimagined Glycerin. That is the first thing. I'm not willing to take quite the stance of get Alex Haynes into the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame, but every once in a while, I have popped off on this. No, I'm pro that. I'm just saying I'm not ready to lead a campaign. You know, and it's funny, in the conversations I've had with cheerleading coach Linda Gooch, I have yet to bring this up. But when I see her again, I'm going to ask her.
Is she control? Is she the matchmaker on this? Is she?
Well, I'm curious her answer to this question. No, I think mascots deserve companionship just fine. I don't see those paired together, so I'm not for the nitro and citronaut pairing.
No, but that doesn't feel like we're on the right. I will say this, though, Trace. You and I spent some time last year in Las Vegas around the Big 12 mascots. Strange bunch. Strange, but the Colorado Buffalo had something happen in there that I'm not quite sure what was going on.
That character is
strange bunch. Perhaps they do need to be alone. I don't know that there's another equivalent that can maybe satisfy the mascot. They're out there. They're a quirky bunch. We got to meet the only mascot that actually talks, which is the West Virginia guy.
I enjoyed that conversation.
Really good kid. I forget his name off the top of my head now, but really good kid. So, but mascots by nature, probably a little weird. So maybe they don't Island of Misfit Toys, Island of Misfit Mascots.
I would like to go through the security at Big 12 Media Days with the West Virginia mascot as he comes in with his gun.
Carry on. What do you do with that? Do you check out your luggage? How do you tag that one? That's a great question. And that's the end of our mailbag. If you want to get in the mailbag again every week, we'll put the call for questions out there and make sure you respond. Give us your question. We'll pick a question of the week at some point. Maybe, just maybe, we'll give a prize out for question of the week. I don't see that happening anytime soon, though, Trace. What I do see happening is finding out what's in the box. Brought to you by our good friends at Alumni Hall, as Trace shakes that box. 4100 North Alafaya Trail, or online at alumnihall.com/UCF. Got gear. Father's Day just passed. If you're late on a gift, don't you worry. You got that figured out. They have everything you need for summer. You going on vacation, Trace? Maybe you need a Yeti, a cooler, a mug, a shirt, a hat, whatever. I was in the Bahamas this past week. I don't know what I would have done without my UCF bucket hat. Saved me from a ton of sunburn.
Bucket hat.
Nice. Get those checked out at Alumni Hall, Trace. What is the question? I'm so excited.
This will be the question. We'll put these to the side for now. If you were a contestant on any reality show, what would it be and why?
Okay.
Well, past, present, future, exists, doesn't exist.
Let me get it. Let me do a Trace choker. Let me get some caveats. Are we considering like Wheel of Fortune a reality show?
No, that's a game show.
Okay, so you're okay. We're strictly doing reality shows. So some sort of a competition, I assume, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that every reality show, the Real World on MTV, I don't think there were competitions on that, right? They just watched them. So
sure,
right?
Yeah.
So you could choose that one, but that's not a game show.
Yeah, I don't think I'll qualify for the Real Housewives. I can't build any houses, so I probably shouldn't be on.
Does your wife watch that Real Housewives show?
You know what? She was watching earlier today. Actually, we had this conversation earlier today. I walked out in my living room after a grueling day of work, and my lovely wife was on the couch watching The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. And so,
is that a reality show? Is that a game show?
It's a reality show. I also don't qualify for that one as well.
Did she enjoy that show?
She seemed to be hooked on it. Apparently, some are more Mormon than others, and some are not really living up to the Mormon standard. And so there's some scandalous nature here. And I'm not sure. I'm not going to watch it ever in my life. Give me Big Brother. I don't want to be outside in Survivor. I don't want to have to be like eating ticks and bugs and something like that. Big Brother, at least you're in a house. You with some people. It feels like you're fed and there's some food and some booze. And it seems like the house is nice enough. And if I get kicked out, what are you going to do? I had a 2-week vacation. So give me Big Brother, I guess, if I had to pick something.
I want you to run this by her. Picture this. Your house.
Yeah.
For a week, maybe 2.
Yeah.
We invite select people over. We have competitions. We vote somebody out every other day. So this is Brian W. Peterson's at the house. I'm at the house. UCF Mike's at the house. JP Gilbert's at the, the characters. The cast. What do you think about that? Run this by her. 2 weeks. We need your house.
Do you think
reality competition?
Do you think anyone would watch a Sons of UCF documentary?
Yes, that's how we launch Sons Plus.
If we just filmed ourselves doing like getting ready for the show, where you're yelling at me about a topic and no one has the link and things don't work, do you think that would play as content?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Report back. running this by her. Two of my favorites are Survivor and The Amazing Race.
Ooh.
I think The Amazing Race because I want to do more travel outside of Lubbock and Manhattan, Kansas. I'd like to do a little more global travel, if only for a day in another country as part of a challenge. I choose that over sleeping out on the beach and eating bugs. So narrowly, Amazing Race over Survivor. I don't know that I could hack 100 days in the Big Brother house. I will revisit that after I win Son's Big Brother after 2 weeks in your house.
That's a great question. Who wins the Son's Big Brother? And why is it not Clay Pasco? I think is the question.
Oh,
Clay
would be a competition
who gets
beast.
voted out first? Let's do this. Like, who's the first person that gets voted out? Is it
Brian?
I thought Brian. Yeah, I feel like Brian's the easy answer. Why is that the answer? That's a great question.
Dolly would hang in there for a long time. He'd be very likable. People would like him.
Dolly's a good guy, good vibes guy. Like, I got some funny jokes, smart, knows a lot of sports. JP Gilbert, polarizing, but I think people would appreciate JP. I think he'd be kept around. I think Clay and Brian are fighting for first one out of the house.
Let us assemble some poll questions on this. Let's get together the roster of potential invitees. How many? Maybe 10. We'll have 10 in the house. We got to figure out the competitions for this thing. It's never going to happen because your wife's never going to agree to have all these people in your house for 14 days. But we can dream.
Yeah.
And let's say it'll be Clay versus JP. Who gets voted out first, and then they advance on, and we'll see if we can play it out.
It's going to be awesome when we do this, and the winner is Dwayne Jones. By the way, it's going to be just a fantastic way to.
Dwayne would be very under the radar.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Dwayne, I think, is a little
right.
sneaky. He's all about business. Like, I think Dwayne would be trouble.
Yeah, good call on that one.
But Brian Clay, sorry for that. But that wraps our show for this week. Trace, one closing thought for me. There's a lot of chatter these days about UCF and how we're going to fare this year. We're not high in anybody's list, and I get that, right? We're not somebody had us at 7 wins or 9 wins or some nonsense, Trace. Here's my message to everybody. Don't fall for the Lane Kiffin rat poison. This team still has a lot of work to be done. Let's learn from last year and keep our expectations in the more moderate position versus assuming we're going to be this great team. And maybe, just maybe, we'll be surprised by what the Knights do. And don't get upset if someone's got us at 3 wins, 4 wins, 5 wins. Here's a quick reminder for everybody. These predictions mean nothing. These people know nothing. They are all just guessing and trying to figure it out. And I love Kelly Ford to death, but he's got this chart with numbers that no one can read, and you just assume he's right all the time. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But let's just root for the Knights. Don't fall for the rat poison. Don't get too upset if someone doesn't have us winning the conference just yet. Let's let some things play out here. And just remember, again, nobody really knows anything except for us here.
Except for us.
Because we know it all. We also know that if you enjoyed this, again, subscribe, rate, review on YouTube, anywhere you get your podcast. We would much appreciate that. We have a goal of getting to a certain number of subscribers soon on YouTube. If you're not one of those, make yourself one of those. And again, tell a friend, a family member, your mailman. I don't really care. Amazon's at your house every day, I assume. Tell that guy. Subscribe to the Sons UCF YouTube channel. Everybody out there, though, have a fantastic week. Take care of yourselves and each other. Trace and I will be back soon for more Sons Today content. Until then, everybody, go Knights.
Charge on.